us how to turn it off, and you're going to help me turn it off.
In 1995-96, when remote viewing was declassified, I read an article in the New York Times and I read an article in the LA Times. It's just a small article talking about this program that had been secret for 20 years, that millions of dollars had been sunk into by the intelligence community. They were using psychics and physicists to deconstruct how the mind behaves psychically.
The thrust of science has been to look at things in mechanical ways and figure out how the sticks and balls sort of piece each other together. And we build up the idea about how the brain works as essentially a mechanical computer. And there's nothing particularly wrong with that idea. It actually does account for a lot of what we see in terms of our behavior and awareness. The problem is that things like psychic phenomena don't fit in very well.
We are more than our physical bodies. That is clearly evident. You know, someday maybe we'll define physicality as being much broader than we do now, but given today's understanding of what it means to be physical, we are clearly more than our physical bodies. We are able to perceive, conceive, understand, conceptualize, and accurately report on things that if we were limited to our physical bodies and our minds were limited to our brains, that we would not be able to do, and yet we can do it. So that tells me right there that the game is far different than is conventionally believed in our society.
For thousands of years, cultures across the globe have all explored perception that goes beyond our five senses. A multitude of ancient cultures have all asked the question, from where does consciousness arise from? What I find really fascinating is this idea that we have this communication over distance of time and space in remote viewing that is unexplainable. It's not explainable at all of how that operation and that mechanic within the mind and within consciousness takes place. We just know that it takes place.
People are always wondering, what is it that makes remote viewing work? That's always the question. Humans want to know, how do things work? And we would love to have an answer to that, and there's a lot of speculation about it. Frankly, the bottom line is we don't know. But here's a possible model. There's this principle in quantum physics called non-locality. Another name for it is Bell's theorem.
Non-locality means that there are ways in which things which appear to be separate are in fact not separate. And the connections that occur between the objects transcend both space and time. And it goes counter to common sense. And common sense says that this object is right here, and it's here in time and here in space. Non-locality says that, well, that's true, but it is also connected to virtually the rest of the universe in ways that were not obviously visible to us.
Non-locality is a physics idea. It's not metaphysics. Non-locality did not come out of ESP research, but was developed by Erwin Schrödinger in the 20s and Einstein in the 30s, where they noticed that there is a connection between elementary particles that are separated when they're born, even though the particles travel away from one another at the speed of light.
We can test it in the laboratory, and we know that that's true, that there's a non-local aspect to every object. Since that's true, then what does non-locality mean when it comes to living tissue? This is a highly complicated system here that I call myself and the brain and so on. Non-locality says that there are aspects of me which are not just here. Not only not here now, but the thing here is sort of spread out in space and time. In a way of thinking then, you can imagine that my brain is spread out throughout the entire universe and all space and time. That's a big brain.
The whole scientific community now agrees that not only theoretically but experimentally, we live in a non-local world where things physically separated from one another can nonetheless be in instantaneous communication.
It's very, very difficult to think about it because it's not just my brain that's spread out throughout the universe. It's everything. All other brains, all other particles, everything
So
is
if it's spread
fully
out
connected.
If it's spread across space and time, that also means that, you know, it's spread through every notion of what we would call the past, every notion of what we would call the future.
That's right.
It's this life in a non-local world that permits psychic functioning to take place. It's not that I close my eyes and send a message to a person 1,000 miles away, but rather, in some sense, there's no separation between my consciousness and his consciousness.
What remote viewing demonstrates is that there is this other perception that is undeniable. And you can call it whatever you want. You can give it whatever name you want, but it is just as accurate as the eyes. It is just as accurate as what you smell with your nose or what you hear with your ears. It is another sense.
As I mentioned earlier, remote viewing is an ability that we all have. We've taught many, many people how to get in touch with their remote viewing ability. So we know that it's a widely distributed, generalizable ability, like a musical ability. One of the things that I learned in the past couple of years is that even at my advanced age, I was able to learn to play the piano. Now, it's not going to get me to Carnegie Hall. There's no substitute for talent, but practice is very important.
What I find very profound about remote viewing is that it echoes to me this idea of the sort of rebuilding of that bridge between man and nature, man and the divine, man and the mystery of the cosmos. And because no one knows how remote viewing works, it just does.
The most interesting and defining ability about remote viewing is that it's not limited by spatial separation. It's no harder to describe what's happening in the far reaches of the Soviet Union than it is to describe what's happening across the street.
I think that most of us walk around asleep, imprisoned in the sort of everyday, and to be sort of brought into the remarkable way of seeing and perceiving life, you know, that remote viewing offers a person can, I think, give people hope and give people a sense of a greater mystery, and wake people up to you know, take more chances and explore things that they didn't think were worth exploring before.